Time for a bit of a throwback, and forgive me if I get just a little nostalgic. In 2014, I was a young Autocar India Cub Scout, and though I'd started reviewing cars by then, I hadn't yet had my taste for something truly high performance. So you can imagine my delight and my surprise when the Audi RS7 Sportback rolled up into the office with its 560 horsepower, and the boss man said to me, "Do you know what, Gavin? Why don't you take a crack at it? Why don't you do the written review of this car?" My heart was pounding and I had goosebumps that day. It definitely changed my perception of what high-performance sedans could do. And I was lucky enough to go on to review the subsequent versions of the RS7 Sportback, and I developed quite an attachment to the car. So you can imagine that when the second generation Audi RS7 came around, I jumped at the chance to do the review. And well, I've got goosebumps all over again. Before we go ahead, tell us in the comments what you think about the Audi RS7. Is it your favorite super sedan? And of course, like, share and subscribe and click the little bell to stay updated. Now, where were we? Now, going by just the on-paper numbers, you might be forgiven for thinking that this is just an evolution of the previous Audi RS7, but that couldn't be further from the truth. This is, for starters, a new generation platform, and though the engine is a 4-litre V8, and yes, it can be traced back to the previous 4-litre V8, the internals are heavily reworked and the turbos are bigger. So while its 600 horsepower may be similar to the performance version of the previous generation, torque is up to 800 Newton meters. It still comes with an 8-speed torque converter automatic and of course quattro all-wheel drive. And the combination means that acceleration, whether in a straight line or through the corners, is absolutely ballistic. This is a car that makes no compromises in its quest for the most efficient acceleration. All the power, all the time, put down straight to the road with no wastage. 0 to 100 is dispatched in a claimed 3.6 seconds. And once again, this 2-ton plus sedan defies physics in the way it accelerates. And if you think those claimed numbers are just too good to be true, guess what? Against our V-Box testing equipment, we managed a 3.5 second 0 to 100 time. So like the previous RS7, it's slightly quicker than Audi's claim, and with rolling acceleration times of less than 3 seconds, this is every bit the overachiever we've come to expect. What's more, this engine sounds a little bit more interesting than before. It's still not particularly loud, but it has a little bit more character to it. It's fruitier. But despite the improved engine noise, there is something quite clinical about the way this engine makes its power. It doesn't bother with trying to be rev happy or mimicking a naturally aspirated engine. It revels in its forced induction. Okay, there is a slight hesitation from the 8-speed auto before it hooks up and delivers all that power, but that only makes the power delivery that much more thrilling. So yes, much like the previous Audi RS7, this one is an absolute rocket in a straight line. But what's changed this time around is that it's a whole lot better in the corners. Most Audi RS cars, particularly the old RS6 and RS7, had a bit of a reputation for being a bit wooden in the corners. But they've really gone and fixed that this time. A big contributing factor is the new rear wheel steering system. It amps up the agility and makes the RS7 so much more eager to turn into corners. Yes, the steering is still not particularly weighty or feelsome, but at least the car feels way more agile than the previous one. It's also a much larger car than the previous RS7, but you wouldn't be able to tell from behind the wheel. The steering is really quick, whether at low speeds or high, and so getting the big RS7 to change direction is easy. It's also quite effortless, and while that's helpful in traffic, we would have liked a bit more weight and reassurance at high speeds from a car with so much performance. The second item of interest is the torque vectoring sports rear differential. What that does is shuffle power to whichever wheel needs it the most at the rear, and what that does is pull you out of corners a whole lot quicker. Now admittedly, both those things are optional extras on the Audi RS7 in India, but if you're in the market for one of these, you'd be foolish not to. Another option we'd recommend taking is the ceramic brakes, because while the standard steel brakes work well enough, with all this power and all that weight, they can get a bit overwhelmed after prolonged hard driving. And you're going to want to drive the RS7 fast, all of the time. So it's quicker and more fun and agile in the corners, but it doesn't stop there. They've somehow also managed to make the RS7 even comfier. Now, as with the previous car, you can get sporty steel springs with adaptive dampers. But this being India and the roads we have here, we would of course recommend the air spring option. But now even on the air springs, the previous RS7 was very firm, but not this one. In its comfort setting on the air springs, this thing could be an Audi A6. It soaks up bumps really well and it has an almost luxurious aura to the way it rides. And now you're probably wondering, how is this car able to do that when it's riding on 21-inch wheels? Well, let me tell you something. 21 inches is the standard size. 22 is the optional size. A big strength of the RS7 then is its ability to give you all this performance without losing sight of the comfort and luxury expected from an Audi sedan. To that end, you get a similar interior to the one of the latest A6, except with far sportier appointments. There's the flat-bottom steering wheel, impressively comfy optional sports seats, special sportier displays for the virtual cockpit digital dials, and what looks like unlacquered carbon fiber trim on the dash and doors. That aside, it's got the same high-quality techie appeal we've come to expect from a modern Audi, headlined by the dual MMI touchscreen interface. There is of course a lot of equipment and some interesting options too, which should make tailoring your RS7 to your liking a bit more fun. And despite all the performance, this is a 4-door sedan, or Sportback in Audi parlance, so it has to be practical, and it is. You'll find huge space in the back seat for 2 large adults, and the lift-back boot can hold a lot of luggage, if you don't mind leaving the spare behind. So how does such a swoopy sedan manage to be so practical? Well, because it's a big car. At 5 meters long, almost 2 meters wide, and nearly 3 meters between the wheels, this is bordering on limousine territory. In fact, these smaller 21-inch wheels and tires only just seem to fill out the arches properly. If you're prepared to be a little bit more careful on bad roads, spec the 22-inch rims, and then you've got one of the most aggressive-looking Audis ever. The big air intakes up front, the blacked-out grille, the significantly widened front and rear tracks, and the accompanying flared wheel arches, and of course, that sloping roof. It's a dramatic-looking thing, and the icing on the cake are the intricate LED headlamps and tail lamps. So, how do we sum up the RS7 then? Well, I'm actually reminded of another big, fast Audi family car. Now, you will have seen Nikhil's review of the Audi RS8, the big SUV that uses the same 600 horsepower V8 as this car. And yes, for something that big to move the way it does, sure seems like it's bending the laws of reality. But let's be honest, while that is impressive, if you really enjoy driving and you want a family car that goes fast, you know you'll be much better off in one of these. Sure, you'll sacrifice the added ground clearance of an SUV, but let's face it, in a performance car, you want to be lower to the road and have a lower center of gravity, and a sedan naturally does that better. And while it offers plenty of performance, what the RS7 really excels at is making that performance accessible to even novice drivers. It's not intimidating, the power feels manageable, it's easy to steer, and its absorbent air suspension even lets it work well on poor road surfaces. Its price of 1.94 crore rupees ex-showroom might be a little hard to digest, especially given its historic sparring partner, the BMW M5 competition, costs a full 39 lakh less. What you're getting is a seriously techy, incredibly stylish, properly luxurious super sedan that's impressively easy to drive quickly, and acceleration that will keep you pinned to your seat with a big smile plastered on your face. Goosebumps? You bet.